2003 Dodge Durango, the last year for this specific body style and the last year Dodge used the wonderful 5.9-liter V8 Magnum before switching to the Hemi and implementing quite possibly one of the ugliest design choices for an SUV I've ever seen. Though nothing compares to the hideousness that is the Pontiac Aztek, of course. So why am I talking about this car? Well, I happen to own one and I'm introducing a restoration series. Now some of you might be thinking, 2003? How the hell can you restore a 2003 car? Well, two things. Number one, 2003 was 20 years ago, and I bet that makes you feel just so old, doesn't it? And two, I live in Michigan. Anyone who lives in Michigan knows that this state has an uncanny ability to turn a happy car full of ambitions and life goals into a deadbeat that gets paid below minimum wage working as a mall Santa. The weather in this state is more bipolar than Japan at the end of World War II, and don't even get me started on the roads. So, without further ado, let's dive right into this epic journey. Well, I wouldn't exactly say epic. This, outlandish... Well, no, that doesn't quite fit either. Let's dive right into this interesting journey. So first things first, we had to get the tire off, as access to the fender is a lot easier without the tire in the way, and the front frame rail could also use some TLC.
It's not gonna work. Oh my god, it worked!
I'd already taken off the plastic wheel wells, so after we got the truck jacked up, we were able to get right to work scraping off the heavy chunks of rust and moving on to sanding the whole thing down. Things were going smoothly until we ran into a little mishap when I decided to use an ancient relic of a vacuum cleaner to help clear some of the dust away. At first, I didn't even have any suction because the stupid hose in the vacuum wasn't connected, but eventually we figured out that you have to shove it into a slot at the bottom of the vacuum for some reason.
Oh, the bag's open! I just got a taste of it.
Karen, did you see where I was? I was like this.
You were right next to the bag!
Look at where here's the power though. I turned it on and it was like...
Oh god. Why? Wow. It shouldn't be dusty anymore now that the bag is gone.
I'm still keeping the mask out.
That's fair. Where is it supposed to... Look, it just stops. Where does it go to? Where does this hose connect?
So where does it connect?
What? Huh?
It was so
You shove it in the bottom of the vacuum. Okay.
Once we finished that, the next step was to apply a rust stop liquid to, well, to stop future rust from showing up. Since there was nothing more we could do to the frame rail while the rust stop was drying, I started to tackle the cancer that was forming on the side of the fender. Ideally, I'd like to save as much metal as possible, but had to get rid of the stuff that wasn't salvageable first. While I was taking care of that, Adam was over on the driver's side removing surface rust from the bottom of the door to prevent more cancerous rust from showing up. And after taking a sizable chunk of metal out from the fender, I was able to get a good look inside, and luckily the inner fender only had a small amount of surface rust on it, and it didn't go very far, so a replacement fender wouldn't be necessary. It would take a lot of sanding and painting, but it could be saved. Once the rust treatment finally dried, Adam masked off the front side of the frame rail and first cleaned the surface with acetone, then gave the frame rail a healthy coat of black paint to protect it from the elements. Next, I started to take out any other roached metal on the fender that I could.
Alright, so we got it painted. We got the rust treat on here. I got rust treat up in this hole on the areas that could be treated at least. Honestly, now all we have to do is wait for this stuff to dry. Got the door painted as well while Adam was doing stuff over here. Door turned out, like I said, pretty nice. Alright, so now we just wait for that all to dry, and we can tackle the rest of the issues with the fender. Alright, so while I'm finishing up clearing out all the roachness from this fender, Adam's going to be taking care of this and the rest of the fender flares that are going to go up and cover, you know, this ugly stuff here, which is why I didn't really bother making this Bondo job look good, because it's going to be covered up anyway, just as long as no water gets in. So yeah, while I'm finishing up this fender, or finishing cutting all the roachness out, Adam's going to be cleaning these things up, you know, wet sanding them, giving them a respray, because I did this a few years ago, but, you know, they really need it if they want to match the rest of the truck.
Also, yes, I am wearing glasses now, and no, it's definitely not because this is the next day. All this work clearly got done in 10 minutes. Also, one thing I want to point out is that if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're going to be wet sanding, it is imperative that you use enough water. The rule of thumb that I go by is if you think you have enough water, you don't. I mean, seriously, you want that entire workbench to be flooded like a small island after a tsunami.
This is probably the worst part of the fender. Because look in here. Here, let me shine some light.
Yeah.
If you can't really see down in there, but this part, it's kind of alright. It's just got some surface rust. But that can be reached and treated. This over here has got to go. At least we were right. The rust does stop. You can see it stop.
Yeah. May I have a suggestion?
I'm open to suggestions.
Hammer from the bottom. Hammer and screwdriver from the bottom.
Violence.
Yeah.
You know I'm all about violence. Or, we gotta do a little redneck science, as some would say.
Yes.
So if you look here, in order to get to this stuff better, I had to detach this bumper and the fog light, so I can push this out of the way so that I can cut this stuff and also know that we'll be able to weld new metal back on. Because it's one thing to cut it off, but you have to be able to, you know, put metal back on.
After I had finished sanding as much of the fender as I could, Adam went over and applied rust stop to the fender while I used Bondo to fill in any scratches that the wet sanding wasn't able to take out of the flares. Unfortunately, like most things, we had to wait for the Bondo to dry before we could do anything else with it. So while that's happening, we started arguably the most tedious task so far, getting the trim and fender flare glue off the body panels. Even with acetone, metal scrapers, rags, patience, and a lot of masochism, 20-year-old body glue was such a huge pain in the ass that I'm pretty sure it gave me hemorrhoids. Speaking of acetone, unless you plan on repainting whatever it is you're using acetone on, then use a different solvent. Acetone is incredibly damaging to paint, as you can see by the discoloration on the fender. However, I plan on repainting the entire truck anyway, so in our case it doesn't matter. going smoothly until catastrophe struck and one of us got seriously injured.
Oh, I got second-hand pain from that. Did you hit the very bottom corner too?
Right here.
Ow.
Powering through the absolute obliteration his entire nervous system suffered, Adam continued to work on the glue, and by this point the Bondo I previously applied to the fender flares was dry, so I went to wet sand them smooth again. Once they were sufficiently smooth, I was able to take them outside and give them a nice gloss black coat of paint. And I gotta say, those body pieces turned out fantastic. I can't wait to get them back on the truck. Firstly, we're going to have to weld some metal back onto the fender, so I hope to see you in the next episode of this brand new series with that. And of course, if you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Later, nerds.